In 2018, there was a chemical attack that happened here in this city, and the Russian state tried to cover it up. We've been speaking to victims of that attack who confirmed absolutely 100%, not just that it happened, but that they were flown to Moscow and intimidated before going to The Hague and testifying. They were forced to write fake statements. And the only reason this stuff is coming out now is because Assad has fallen in this country, and now the truth can finally come out.
We're going to take these findings, we're going to be submitting them to the UN in hopes that perhaps the global community will reopen these investigations and justice will be brought to both Assad and to Russia. We're releasing this report with great risk. All the advice we've been given is to not release this kind of information until we've left the country. But we've decided, because of the importance of this information, we'll be releasing it tonight so that everyone can know the true war crimes committed by both Assad and by Russia.
Almost 1 century after chemical weapons were banned by the civilized world after their horrific use in World War I, we are sadly witnessing another suspected chemical attack in Syria. At least 40 people were killed, hundreds wounded, in a targeted attack on a hospital in a rebel-held city east of Damascus.
Many women and children are among the dead. Pictures of the horrific attack now coming into our newsroom. Reaction is pouring in from Washington today.
Within hours of the story breaking, Russian media and officials begin a massive propaganda campaign suggesting it never happened.
Well, Russia's foreign minister says he guarantees Moscow did not tamper with the alleged chemical gas attack site in Duma. Speaking to the BBC, Sergei Lavrov maintains the attack was staged.
The event did not take place. What did take place was the staged thing.
None of whom confirmed the idea that there was a chemical attack. There were no trace of chemicals, of chemical warfare.
The United Nations sends a delegation to investigate the attack. They are fired on by Assad forces. The witnesses of the attack appear in a press conference at The Hague, but something doesn't add up. Prosecutors describe their behavior as strange. It appears they're under duress by the Russians. The Pentagon accused Moscow of lying and covering up the chemical attack.
We have credible information that indicates that Russian officials are working with the Syrian regime to deny and to delay these inspectors from gaining access to Duma. Russian officials have worked with the Syrian regime, we believe, to sanitize the locations of those suspected attacks and remove incriminating evidence of chemical weapons use. Some people have seemingly been pressured by the government to change their stories about what actually occurred that night.
When the Assad regime fled to Moscow, stories of decades of war crimes and horror from his legacy start pouring out as civilians can finally tell the world what happened in Syria.
This is the street of the chemical attack. Tawfiq lost his wife and 4 children that day.
يجي لهون الصحافة الروسية أنا أسكت ما في كيماوي ما في كيماوي ينسكوا أعمدة وألوية ورتب كل واحد يقول لي هيك بدك تحكي أولادك ماتوا أثر حرب ما ماتوا بالكيماوي أولادي ماتوا بالكيماوي 4 وأمهم زوجتي قمر وعلي ومحمد وجودي وزوجتي أخي وزوجته و5 أطفال. بالنقطة 1 حطوا لي رذاذ بتعبيت هي عيني هالقد هذا خدي هيك من لون هي يعني يوم بشار يجي لون على الحارة مع علم الدكاترة لا تحكي زيادة انفي من الغبرة من ريحة الحرب من ريحة الضرب القذائف لا تقول في كيماوي. حطوني دعسوني بقشريهم بجناية حرستها حطوني بال215 بالمزة حطوني بالجناح العاشر بسجن عدرا 8 أشهر تعذيب وقال لي إذا بترد بتفتح تمك بكلمة المرة الجاي صيدنايا. هي أخي وأولاده الله ينتقم من إيران ومن روسيا. هدول كله شاركوا بالحرب معه، هدول يروعوا أولادنا وشهدائنا.
Before we leave the home of Tawfiq, he says he wants to show us something. This is known as Slaughter Street, the site of the mass graves where his family are buried.
بعد ما فات النظام قالوا لي انه نشلوهم ردوا واخذوهم لعند مفرق عبد الرؤوف في محضر على العظم، حطوا عليهم مازوت وحرقوهم. تمنيت اكون معهم، تمنيت لو ما عايش.
Tawfiq's testimony directly contradicts Russian reports. Bodies were dug up and burned to hide evidence from investigators.
The next day, we receive a text message. It's from a local man, one of those who testified at The Hague.
My name is Abdurrahman Hijazi. I'm a resident of Duma. I'm just an ordinary citizen. I came to the hospital that day. There were no evidence of chemical attack in Duma. Thank you.
It shows flight logs for him and other witnesses to Moscow before their testimony. He says they were flown there and interrogated and forced to write false statements about the chemical attack.
هلا أول شيء أول ما دخلت الدولة السورية على دوما، دخلوا على دوما صاروا يدوروا علي إنه أنا طالع بالفيديو تبع الكيماوي تبع مشفى الميداني. واخذوني من دوما على فرع الخطيب. من فرع الخطيب قعدت 4 أيام، قعدت بالفرع الخطيب 4 أيام. بعد 4 أيام قالوا لنا جهزوا حالكم بدكم تسافروا. قلت له لوين؟ قال هلا بتعرفوا. يعني كل الضباط قعدنا نحن وياهم وصاروا يسألونا شو اللي صار. قلنا له هذا اللي صار معنا. قال لا هيك بتحكوا. قلنا له مثل ما بدك، أنا هيك بحكي، مثل ما أنت بدك أنا بقول. قال لا ما صار شيء. قلت له ما صار شيء. قال ما حدا مات. قلت له ما حدا مات. قال خلص هدول بتحكوون. قلنا له ايه. حطوني 4 أيام في فرع الخطيب. بعد 4 أيام اخذوني من فرع الخطيب على المطار دمشق الدولي. من المطار ركبونا بطياره ودغري سفرونا على موسكو. نزلنا بموسكو قعدنا يوم واحد وسفرونا على لاهاي على محكمة دولية. فتنا قعدنا بالاجتماع وخلصنا دغري سفرونا على سوريا. هدول اللي اخذونا نحن كلنا طالعين في فيديو تبع المشفى اللي صاروا ينقونا بالواحد واخذونا. اول ما وصلنا نزلونا بالاوتيل، حطونا. قال اطلعوا ناموا. قعدنا بالاوتيل نمنا تقريبا شي 3 ساعات. اخذونا عزمونا على فطور. يعني شلون قالوا لنا هون احكوا. قال تمام خلوكم على نفس الكلام انه اطلعوا احكوهم. كل واحد صار يحكي. قال تمام هاد. جبنا بالطياره وانتقلنا على محكمة لاهاي. هن طالعوا لنا الجوازات، كل شيء طالعوا لنا اياه هن. تمموها مسرحيه هي، انه كانت هي قصه الكيماوي مسرحيه، هي كنت حاسس بخطر. لانه اهلي كانوا هون موجودين. اي غلطه في اهلي موجودين هون بيروحوا اهلي.
Are you taking a risk telling us this now?
انقتل. وطالب انه الحمايه إلنا، انه الحقيقه والحق لازم يظهر. وصار هذا الشيء قدامي. الساعة شي 7 إلا 5 دقائق تقريبا. ما لاقي غير العالم فايتة بكثافة. هلا شعور كثير صعب. الاهالي الليالي اللي فاتت صار يطلع من تم الزباد وصار يطلع منها شيء بلعت بالأرض، والمشفى كلها فاتت ببعضها بحالة هلع كتير كبير. من العمليات العسكرية كانوا متخبيين بالأقبية، يعني مين ما يكون هو اللي ضارب لازم يتحاسب، يعني هو اللي كان بوتين ولا بشار الأسد مجرمين حرب، ولازم إنه كل الدول تحاسب هاي الأشخاص.
On our final day in Duma, we meet a father and son. Both had testified at The Hague.
My name is Amar Hassan. I'm the father of this little boy you can see here. We saw absolutely no evidence of chemical weapons.
In their testimony, they denied smelling gas. They told us the opposite.
أنا وقت اللي اجيت بحدود الساعة 9:30 أو 10. وقت اللي اجيت ما لقيت حدا بالبيت، رحت على المشفى. كانت مرتي وولادي بالمشفى، من ضمنهم ابني محطوط على التخت ومنه عسى عليه يعني أنا فكرته ميت بس عايش. وفي شيء بتحس يعني ريحة، أنا بالنسبة للريحة أنت يعني مثل اللي قاعد بغرفة مثلا ومفتوحة عليه غاز، فعشنا فيه نحن بخوف ورعب طبعا بنتمنى نحن لكل مين عذبنا يتحاسب مين كان يكون.
We want to understand how important this information is and what can be done. So we speak to Hamish Gordon. At the time, he was NATO's chemical weapons expert and heavily involved in the research of the 2018 chemical attack. Hamish, it's good to speak to you. Audrey and I are in Syria still, and we want to get a report out urgently, and we want to get your opinion of what has just happened. In the last 48 hours, Audrey and I have been speaking to witnesses who testified at The Hague about the 2018 chemical attack that happened in Duma here in North Damascus. One of the witnesses told us that they were flown to Moscow before the Netherlands, before they went to testify at The Hague. And multiple other witnesses, including someone that was working in the hospital, described in detail the chemical attacks, that gas was used. They described the smell, they described it vividly, and it contradicts everything that they testified about, and it contradicts all the propaganda that Russia put out. We've sent some of this to you. Does this surprise you?
I'm not surprised at all, but I'm delighted, absolutely delighted that this information is getting out, and hopefully the correct message, the correct bits and pieces that are needed for the International Criminal Court will now get to The Hague, and those responsible, the old Assad regime and the Russians, will one day have to face the court and will be dealt with appropriately.
If Russia did fly these witnesses via Moscow, how does that tamper the evidence?
Certainly, I didn't know that they'd flown by Russia at all, but one suspected that the people giving evidence had been heavily influenced by the Syrian regime and the Russians, and were coerced into it. And when you look at the videos of them in The Hague, they all look absolutely terrified. And those of us who knew absolutely what happened, knew that they were talking complete rubbish. Unfortunately, that's the way the Russians operate. That's the way the old Assad regime used to operate, through intimidation.
So Audrey and I are going to put this information out publicly today, because if anything happens to us or the footage, then no one's going to see what happened. So we're going to upload this tonight. But what should we do with the raw footage? What should we do with this information through official channels?
Real evidence, the stuff that you now have, is absolutely crucial that it sees the light of day as soon as possible. So if you can duplicate it and bring it out of Syria with you. And it's absolutely key that those people who have spoken to you also speak to the APCW, and any evidence that you've collected must be stored and presented to them, because that is the only way that these atrocities and those responsible will be brought to book. From the time I started going to Syria investigating chemical weapons attacks in 2012, the people who were being attacked asked why the international community was ignoring them, and the only solace I could give them was collect evidence of these atrocities, and one day those people responsible will get to court and will get to jail in The Hague. just as the Bosnian and Serb generals who committed atrocities in the Bosnian War did back in the 90s.
Hamish, this has been invaluable. Look, we're going to go and put this together now, but thank you.
Thank you so much.
Every victim in our report told us they would re-testify at The Hague.
Now that Assad has fled, the truth about what happened under his brutal regime can start to come to light.
A targeted attack on a hospital.
And still not without risk.
For the first time, their truth can finally come out.